The departure board at Austin Bergstrom Airport showed our flight to O'Hare boarding in 8 minutes, when Wyatt let go of my hand and kept walking. I stood at the entrance to the security checkpoint, holding my carry-on with both hands, watching the back of his gray jacket get smaller. Families pushed strollers around me. A little boy was crying somewhere near the newsstand. The air smelled like fried food and recycled AC, and my husband of 5 years hadn't looked back once. My name is Lindsay. I'm 35 years old, and this was supposed to be our anniversary trip. I had spent 3 months planning it. 4 days at a resort outside Austin, spa package, rooftop dinner reservation, a private wine tasting on the second evening. Our marriage had been strained for most of the past year, the way marriages get when one person gets promoted and starts treating the other like a rough edge that needs smoothing down. I thought if I could just create 4 perfect days, we could find our way back to something. The bracelet was my grandmother's. She passed 2 years ago, and I wore it every single day after her funeral. Left wrist, thin gold chain, small blue enamel flowers. It wasn't expensive, but before she died, she pressed it into my palm and said, "Keep this close." So I did. On our last morning at the resort, while we were checking out, one of Wyatt's Chicago colleagues spotted us in the lobby and came over. I watched Wyatt shake the man's hand and smile, and then I watched his eyes drop to my wrist. When the colleague walked away, Wyatt pulled me to the side. "Can you take that off?" he said quietly. "It looks like something from a craft fair." I told him it belonged to my grandmother. I told him I wasn't taking it off. He didn't argue. He simply reached over, unclasped it from my wrist in one motion, and dropped it into the open mouth of the lobby trash can, the way you'd throw away a gum wrapper. I didn't scream. I didn't move for a full 10 seconds. The front desk clerk was laughing with a guest. Elevator doors opened and closed, and I was standing in the middle of it all, looking at a trash can. I fished the bracelet out while Wyatt went to get the rental car. I put it back on my wrist, clasped it, and said nothing during the drive to the airport. Neither did he. That kind of silence has a physical weight, something cold lodged between 2 people in a front seat that no amount of radio can fill. At the airport, I told him that what he did wasn't something you do to a person. He told me to lower my voice. I didn't lower my voice. That was when he picked up his carry-on and walked away from me down the terminal. I thought he needed space. I followed at a distance, giving him room the way I always had, the way 5 years of marriage to a man like Wyatt trains you to do. But when I reached gate 14, the monitor showed final boarding. I could see him near the jet bridge, boarding pass out. He scanned it and stepped through the door without turning around. I thought he would stop. I thought he would at least wait at the threshold and gesture for me to hurry. Instead, he turned the corner and disappeared. I ran to the agent. I had my pass on my phone, but the aircraft door had already been sealed. Company policy. She was sorry. Through the window, I watched our plane reverse from the gate. The afternoon Texas sun hit the fuselage and turned it white. On that plane was my husband, our checked luggage, and whatever was left of the marriage I had been trying so hard to hold together. I didn't cry in the terminal. I pulled my carry-on to a row of seats, sat down, and looked at my phone. A text from Wyatt arrived within a minute. "You always make everything harder than it needs to be. Book yourself on the next flight." I read it twice. No question asking if I was okay, no apology. Just the clear message that being left behind was my own doing. I took a screenshot and created a folder on my phone. I named it Keep This. Then I went to the airline counter to rebook. The agent ran my debit card. Declined. I tried the joint credit card Wyatt and I shared. Declined. I paid with a combination of miles and the cash I had in my wallet, hands steady, voice even. While she looked at me with that particular kind of sympathy that strangers offer when they can tell a situation is worse than it appears. While I was still at the counter, a woman in her 60s touched my arm. She and her husband had been in line behind me. They'd been waiting for a later flight and had watched the situation unfold at the gate. Not on the plane, just nearby, standing in the boarding area while the last groups went through. "The young woman he sat next to at the gate," she said carefully. They clearly knew each other. She had her hand on his arm before they even boarded. I thought you should know." I thanked her. I meant it from somewhere deep and hollow. I found a quiet corner near a charging station and called my bank. After identity verification, the representative confirmed that my joint credit had been placed under a temporary hold that morning at 9:17 a.m., before we'd even left the hotel. The reason logged: Precautionary hold requested by joint account holder. My personal debit account had been flagged via the automated fraud alert line, triggered using my social security number and date of birth. 9:17 a.m., while I was zipping my suitcase, Wyatt was on the phone with our bank, making sure that if I was stranded in Austin, I wouldn't be able to pay for anything. This wasn't impulse. This was a plan. I requested an email of the full account access log and asked them to restore access to my personal account for review. Then I opened Instagram. Wyatt had been at his company for 4 years. His employer kept a staff directory on their website. I found the business development team, 8 people. I scrolled through. One of the women was named Courtney. Her public Instagram was linked from her profile. Her most recent post was from 2 days ago. A photo taken at a pool bar. No location tag, but I recognized the exact curve of the poolside bar at our Austin resort, the one where Wyatt and I had sat on our first evening. She was photographed from the shoulders up, sunglasses on, and in the soft background blur, visible if you knew what you were looking for, was a man in a navy shirt. Wyatt had worn a navy shirt that afternoon. I opened my notes app and typed, Courtney BizDev, same resort, same days. Then I booked a room at an airport hotel and took a cab. That night I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, with my laptop open and the bank statements on screen. The transactions were not hidden. They were right there, line after line. Regular Venmo payments to Courtney, $900, $200, $700. Labeled dinner and help and utilities. A $3,400 charge at a jewelry boutique in River North that I had never seen and had certainly never benefited from. A $6,000 wire to a property management company at a Lincoln Square address. I stared at that wire transfer for a long time. I called my mom. She picked up on the third ring, and when I told her what had happened, starting with the bracelet in the lobby trash, ending with the bank statements on my screen, she went quiet in a way that scared me more than yelling would have. Then she said, Lindsay, come home as soon as you can. Whatever you need. Your dad and I are here. Those 8 words held more than 5 years of marriage had, and I had to press my lips together to keep myself from falling apart completely. I didn't sleep. I worked. I created a folder on my desktop labeled documentation and moved everything into it. Screenshots, the bank email, the Venmo history, the Instagram photo, Wyatt's text from the gate, the account access log showing the 9:17 a.m. timestamp. I organized it the way I organize audit files at work. Chronological, cross-referenced, complete. When I was done, something in me went very quiet and very clear. The version of me that had been afraid of Wyatt's moods, that had been apologizing for things that weren't her fault, that had fished her grandmother's bracelet out of a hotel trash can and said nothing. She was still in there, but she was no longer driving. I flew back to Chicago the next morning. I didn't go to the condo. I went directly to an attorney named Margaret Holt, whose office was on the 22nd floor of a building on Michigan Avenue. She shook my hand, offered me coffee, and said, "Start from the beginning." So I did. She took notes. She didn't react visibly to any of it except once, when she saw the $6,000 wire to the Lincoln Square Property Management Company. She asked if I'd looked up the address. I told her I had. It was a residential building. She wrote something down and said we'd need to find out whose name was on that lease. She also told me not to tip Wyatt off. Don't delete anything. Don't go to the condo alone. Bring her any physical documents I found. Amy met me outside our building that evening with 2 coffees, exactly as she'd promised when I'd called her from Austin. We rode the elevator to the 14th floor in silence. Wyatt was in the kitchen when we walked in. When he saw Amy, his face did the calculation. Not to be sorry, it's not salutation. I set my phone on the kitchen island with the voice recorder running, screen up. I'm not having any conversations without someone present, I told him. He tried several things. Calm first. He'd frozen the accounts to protect our finances. He hadn't known how I'd react. Then anger, calling Amy's presence disrespectful. Then dismissive, waving at the idea that bank transfers proved anything. Then, explain the $6,000 to the Lincoln Square Property Management, I said. He called it an investment, a property he was looking into. In whose name? I asked. He didn't answer. I went to the home office to get my personal documents. The drawer where I kept my premarital financial records, my birth certificate, the savings bond my father had set aside for me. It was empty. The combination lock was still intact. Someone had used the combination. I found the box in the guest room closet, behind a row of Wyatt's old coats, cardboard lidded, no label. Inside, my savings bond, 3 file folders. The first folder had a lease agreement, Unit 4B, Lincoln Square, tenant, Courtney, Kozagner line, Wyatt's signature dated 4 months ago. The second had receipts. The River North Jewelry Boutique, 3 dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, a hotel in Milwaukee for a weekend last October. The weekend Wyatt told me he was at a sales conference. The third folder had a printout of my savings bond with a redemption request form, paperclip to it. The signature on the form was supposed to be mine. I have had the same signature since I was 19. I looked at what was on that paper for a long time. I photographed every page. Wyatt heard me moving in the guest room. He appeared in the doorway when I came out with the box. He stepped toward me, and Amy moved between us without being asked. I called Margaret from the hallway. She told me to leave tonight. Keep the box. Come to her office at 8 in the morning. The lease cosign gives us asset dissipation grounds, she said. The redemption form is potentially criminal fraud. Don't engage with him further. I packed a bag. Wyatt followed me to the bedroom doorway. Lindsay. His voice had dropped to something low and careful. I made mistakes, I know that. But we can fix this quietly, without lawyers. Without making this into something it doesn't have to be. I zipped my bag and looked at him. You dropped my grandmother's bracelet in a trash can, I said. You froze my accounts before you even walked away from me at the gate. You co-signed a lease for the woman you brought to our anniversary destination. And you forged my signature on a savings bond redemption. I picked up my bag. There is nothing left to fix. I walked out. I cried at Amy's kitchen table for about 20 minutes. Not because I wanted any version of Wyatt back. That was already gone. I cried because I had spent so long making myself smaller inside that marriage that I'd lost track of who I was before it. The crying wasn't grief for him. It was something releasing, the way your shoulders drop when you finally put down something you'd been carrying so long. You'd forgotten it was in your hands. Then I dried my face and went back to organizing the documents. Margaret filed for divorce the next day. She also filed an emergency motion to freeze all joint marital assets and a separate motion regarding the suspected fraudulent redemption of the savings bond. A handwriting specialist she worked with gave a preliminary assessment within 48 hours. The signature on the redemption form was not mine. Wyatt called me repeatedly. I didn't answer. His texts started with "I love you" and ended with "just tell Margaret to stand down and we can handle this like adults." I forwarded everyone to Margaret. She replied, "Perfect. Keep them coming." 10 days after filing, Margaret received a cooperation notice from Courtney's attorney. Courtney had documents. Every wire transfer, every text message in which Wyatt had explicitly told her the money came from his personal premarital funds and that his wife wouldn't find anything. She had believed the marriage was already over in all but paperwork. She wanted no part of what it had actually been. Wyatt was placed on administrative leave the following week. His company had flagged irregularities in his expense reports before Margaret ever called them. The divorce discovery process simply gave them the paper trail they'd been missing. I went back to work. I sat in my office and did my job, and let the legal process do what legal processes do when you hand them enough evidence. Margaret handled everything that needed handling. My parents drove down from Rockford on a Saturday, and we sat in my parents' kitchen. My dad's kitchen, my real home, and ate my mom's chicken soup and didn't talk about Wyatt at all. We talked about the garden. We talked about my cousin's new baby. At one point, my dad put his fork down and said, "We're proud of you, you know. Not for getting divorced, for not disappearing." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. The divorce was finalized 11 weeks after Margaret filed. Wyatt signed every agreement. The savings bond value was repaid in full. He relinquished his claim to the marital home equity. The Lincoln Square lease was dissolved, the early termination costs drawn from his portion of the marital assets. The day I signed the final decree, I drove myself to the courthouse alone. I didn't need anyone with me. I signed where Margaret told me to sign, shook her hand in the hallway, and walked back to the parking structure. I sat in my car for a few minutes before starting the engine. October light came in gray and flat through the concrete gaps. I thought about standing at Gate 14 in Austin, watching the plane pull away, thinking that was the worst moment. That woman didn't know yet that she was standing at the very beginning of something. I looked down at my left wrist. The bracelet caught the light, small blue enamel flowers on a thin gold chain, the clasp slightly worn, exactly the way my grandmother had left it. I started the car. There are people who walk out of your life banking on you falling apart. They build the whole plan around it. Freeze the accounts, take the documents, get on the plane, wait for the phone call that never comes because you're too scared or too broke to make it. What they don't plan for is the version of you that doesn't fall apart. The one who takes a screenshot instead of crying. The one who asks for the account access log. The one who carries a box of evidence out of a house that was never really hers anyway, and hands it to a woman named Margaret Holt on the 22nd floor of a building on Michigan Avenue. I didn't lose Wyatt. I lost 5 years of trying to be someone easier to love than I actually was. And in exchange, I got back the person I'd been before. I started shrinking. The one with the grandmother's bracelet on her wrist and nothing left to prove. That turned out to be more than enough.